Montana Territory, June of 1878. The sun had barely cleared the jagged peaks when the stagecoach rattled into the town of Willow Creek, trailing dust and a heavy silence that settled like a shroud. Folks rarely stirred much at newcomers, but when a fragile young woman was carefully lifted rather than stepping down, whispers followed her like crows after a harvest. Della Zellers had been plagued by illness most of her life. Some weakness in her lungs, the physicians muttered. Her persistent cough had kept her confined, denied her the joyous freedom of school, the swirling excitement of dances, and the sweet promise of becoming someone's cherished wife. Too delicate for marriage, they declared behind cupped hands, and sometimes with cruel directness. By 23, she had resigned herself to a life of quiet days and the solace of a well-worn book. But when her estranged uncle passed the previous spring, leaving her utterly alone, her devoted older brother had painstakingly saved enough for the fare and bravely sent her west, hoping she'd find a home with their cousin, a seamstress renowned in Willow Creek. But that cousin had not come to meet her, nor had any welcoming face appeared. She sat alone on a weathered crate outside the dusty station, her worn carpet bag clutched tightly to her chest, when a voice, deep and resonant, broke through her despair. "You expecting someone, miss?" She looked up, startled. A imposing figure stood over her, tall and coated in trail dust, a rifle secured across his broad back. His eyes, the color of weathered steel, were shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, revealing a face etched with the harsh realities of sun and unrelenting labor. He possessed the quiet strength of a man who rarely indulged in idle conversation. I'm Della." Her voice trembled, scratchy from the arid air. "But it seems they've forgotten." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering, before setting down the heavy feed sack he had been carrying with a soft thud. "I'm Cade Callahan," he stated simply. "I work the Circle C Ranch, west of town. Do you have a place to stay?" "My cousin owns the dress shop here," she said, forcing a brittle smile. "At least I certainly hope she still does." Cade's gaze moved across the street, his expression unreadable. The shop was tightly shuttered. A hastily written note, crudely nailed to the door. "Moved to Bozeman, no forwarding address." Della's stomach plunged, a wave of nausea washing over her. Her brother was completely unaware of this cruel twist of fate, and she possessed no means to secure passage on another stage. Cade rubbed his calloused jaw thoughtfully. "You need a place to rest, out of the sun. Come on. Ma keeps a spare room for ranch hands who get thrown or broken, a place to heal. It's not fancy, but clean and quiet." She hesitated, her mind racing with uncertainty. "I am not sure that would be considered proper." "I'm not proposing marriage," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Just offering a bed and supper until you figure out your next step." That night, Della found herself seated at a well-worn oak table in a modest house nestled amidst the sprawling grasslands. Cade's mother, a quiet woman with streaks of silver illuminating her temples and a kind, deliberate manner of stirring simmering beans, offered Della a soft, hand-stitched blanket and a small room of her own. No probing questions were asked, only gentle acceptance. For an entire week, Della did not cough blood. She moved with slow deliberation, seeking the cool refuge of shade. But she found she could breathe deeper, with less pain. She helped Cade's mother with the mundane tasks, washing dishes, peeling potatoes, mending a torn shirt sleeve. The predictable, soothing rhythm of ranch life began to permeate her weary bones. Cade remained a man of few words, but he always respectfully tipped his hat to her in the mornings, and when her hand trembled while struggling to lift the heavy water pail, he wordlessly relieved her of the burden, carrying it himself. On the 8th day, she found him in the dimly lit barn after supper, meticulously brushing down a sleek bay gelding. "The doctor in Missouri predicted I would not survive past 25, she confessed quietly, her voice barely audible. "I turned 24 in August." Cade paused, looking over his shoulder, and met her worried gaze. "Doctors are not always right, Miss Della," she offered a small nod. "But they are often close." He deliberately set the brush down, his movements measured. "You can stay here as long as you need with us, Della." Her breath hitched in her chest, surprise and gratitude mixing with her ever-present fear. "You are kind, Mr. Cade, but kindness is fleeting." He walked towards her, his steps deliberate, neither hurried nor hesitant, but steady. "I do not offer anything that I cannot keep, Della Zellers," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. The next morning, Della was awakened by the thunderous sound of hoofbeats approaching the ranch. A child's piercing cry followed, cutting through the morning air. She rushed outside, her heart pounding with dread. A dilapidated wagon had broken down on the desolate trail near the ranch gate. A young boy, no older than 3, sobbed inconsolably in the tall grass beside it. His older sister, perhaps 6, stood protectively beside him, clutching a tattered shawl. No adult was in sight. Cade was already kneeling beside them, his strong hands gentle. "Where's your ma?" "She left," the girl whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Said she was coming back. She didn't." Cade's face hardened with anger, but his touch remained gentle and reassuring. He carefully picked up the weeping boy and called out for his mother, his voice echoing across the silent plains. Della knelt beside the girl, her touch comforting. "What is your name, sweetheart?" "Rosie," she whispered. "My brother is Reuben." That night, the 2 abandoned children slept soundly in the very room Della had occupied upon her arrival. Cade's mother sat in quiet contemplation, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, as she meticulously folded the girl's worn shawl. Della gently helped wash the dirt from the boy's tired feet. "They were abandoned, left," Cade said quietly after the exhausted children had finally drifted off to sleep. "The wagon was nearly out of water. Someone deliberately left them to die. I want to care for them," Della declared immediately, surprising even herself with the intensity of her conviction. "I do not know how long I have, but while I do, I want to help them, to give them comfort." Cade nodded once, his gaze filled with respect. "Then we will, Della, we will." Over the following weeks, Della's health steadily improved. She still coughed, but the violent fits diminished in frequency and intensity. The crisp mountain air, the warmth of the dry sun, the way Rosie instinctively curled into her lap as if she had always belonged there, all of it gave her something she had not possessed before. A purpose, a reason to fight. Cade tirelessly repaired the broken wagon, his hands skilled and determined. He sought out a woman in town who remembered seeing the children with their mother a couple of weeks prior. She reported that the woman had been traveling north with a man who clearly resented the presence of the children. "She isn't coming back," Cade confirmed grimly. Della offered no argument. She knew it to be true. That evening, she watched Cade lift Reuben onto the back of the gentle saddle horse, carefully walking the horse slowly around the fenced corral. The small boy giggled with pure delight, his arms outstretched. Della smiled warmly, then was suddenly seized by a fit of violent coughing. The spell doubled her over, leaving her weak and breathless. Cade was there in an instant, his strong arms supporting her. He did not speak, only held her tightly until the paroxysm passed. When she could finally breathe again, she leaned gratefully into his strength. "I do not have much to give, Cade," she whispered, her voice laced with pain. "I may not have long." "You have more to offer than most, Della," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this, Cade? Why are you helping me?" He gently touched her cheek, his rough thumb stroking softly. "Because you are the first thing I have truly wanted in a long time, and I am not about to let you go without a fight, Della Zellers." The first sharp frost kissed the prairie grass early that year. By late August, delicate threads of ice traced patterns on the sagebrush before dawn, and the smoke rising from the chimney curled lazily, higher and slower, as if the very house itself ached in the cold morning air. Della had begun waking before the sunrise, carefully pulling Rosie close under the shared quilt for warmth before gently easing out of bed. Each movement was deliberate, her ribs still tender from the lingering effects of her last coughing fit, but her feet felt grounded and steady on the familiar plank floor. In the kitchen, Cade's mother was already at the stove, carefully pressing cornmeal into a seasoned skillet with practiced precision. Della tied on her worn apron without being asked. "You'll want to wrap Rosie up warmly today," the older woman said, her gaze knowing. "Cade's driving fence up near the high pass. The winds bite fierce early up there. He's taking Reuben with him." She nodded in understanding. "That boy follows him like a shadow. Della stirred honey into the simmering tea kettle and poured 2 steaming cups, placing one on the table and carrying the other out to the porch. The wind had not yet begun its mournful howl, and the sky was the pale, crystalline blue that only appears right before it turns bitterly cold. She found Cade patiently saddling the chestnut mare, his movements economical and precise. Reuben crouched nearby, diligently piling small rocks into a carefully constructed tower. "I packed bread and salt pork," she said, holding out a cloth bundle tied with twine. He took the offering without looking at her hands. "Thanks, Della." She hesitated, her heart pounding softly. "Will you be riding past the North Ridge?" "That's the plan." She glanced towards the thick stand of trees that lined the distant edge of the sprawling pasture. "There's a healthy patch of elder growing along the stream bed there, if you have time." His eyes flicked to meet hers, a silent understanding passing between them. "I will bring it back for you, Della." Della nodded and turned to go back inside. "Della," he said, and something in the timbre of his voice caused her to stop in her tracks. He stepped closer, gently brushing a stray piece of hay from her sleeve. "When you first came here, I figured you would leave as soon as you got your footing, as soon as you were well enough. Truth be told, I thought I would too one day." His jaw tightened, as if he were struggling to express something profound, but Reuben tugged impatiently at his vest, eager to begin their ride. "Be careful, Cade," she said softly. "Always, Della." She watched them ride out, fading into distant dust and indistinct shapes against the stark horizon. Then she went back inside the warm house and meticulously began mending the worn hem of Rosie's only winter coat. Midday drifted by with the simple, repetitive tasks of keeping, sorting dried beans, rinsing linens, patiently showing Rosie how to stitch straight, even lines. The girl's small hands trembled with intense concentration, but she stubbornly refused to give up. Della refrained from praising her aloud. Instead, she simply placed a reassuring hand on her back and let it rest there. By late afternoon, ominous clouds began to gather ominously behind the distant peaks, not the swirling, turbulent clouds of a summer storm, but the heavy, brooding kind that presaged colder, harsher days. Cade had not returned by supper time. The simmering stew continued to bubble softly on the stove. Della set the table anyway, her movements precise and deliberate. "He will be in before dark," Cade's mother said quietly, but Della detected the subtle tremor in her voice. She was trying to suppress her own rising worry. After the dishes were washed and neatly put away, and Rosie was safely tucked into bed, Della wrapped a warm shawl around her shoulders and quietly stepped out onto the porch. The wind had intensified, its mournful howl carrying the sharp scent of pine mixed with the unmistakable frigid breath of approaching winter. She sat on the top step, tucking her hands protectively under her arms, seeking warmth. She did not hear the approaching horse until it was nearly at the gate. Cade dismounted stiffly, leading the weary mare by the reins. A bundle of elder branches was securely tied to the saddle, the berries dark and heavy with ripeness. "The fence will hold for another season," he said, his voice flat with fatigue. "But the north slopes are washing out badly." She rose slowly, her movement stiff. "You are late, Cade." "Got turned around near the draw. Reuben's asleep in the saddle and I didn't want to risk waking him." She stepped down from the porch and gently lifted the sleeping boy, his small weight feeling heavier than she remembered. Cade carried the precious bundle of elder branches and followed her silently inside. Later, after Reuben was settled soundly near the crackling fire and the tea kettle was steaming once more, Cade leaned wearily against the wall, his arms folded across his chest. "I saw fresh elk sign near the old hunting camp today," he said, his voice low and serious. "The tracks were recent. I didn't think they ventured down this early in the season. They don't unless something is driving them." Della swallowed hard, her fear rising. "Wolves, maybe?" She poured a second cup of tea and handed it to him, their fingers brushing lightly. He did not pull away. "I used to think that I would die alone in a dreary boarding house room," she confessed softly. "Some small room with no windows or light. This place is not much, Cade." "It is everything, Della." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, seeing beyond her frailty, recognizing the strength that burned within. "I meant what I said, Della. I don't offer what I cannot keep. I'm not asking for promises, but I'm not afraid to make one." She deliberately set her cup down on the table. I won't give you half a life, Cade. You are giving what is yours to give, what you have to offer. That is more than I have ever had or could ever have hoped for." The wind rattled the shutters of the small house. The fire popped and hissed in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Neither of them moved. Then, with a quiet certainty that resonated deep within her soul, he reached for her trembling hand. "I want a life with you, Della." She took a slow, deep breath that did not catch in her throat. "Then we will make one, Cade," he smiled, a slow, heartfelt smile that was not born out of fleeting relief, but out of unwavering knowing, out of conscious choosing, and this time when he gently pulled her close, she did not tremble with fear, but leaned into his strength with a quiet acceptance. October settled on the vast prairie like a soft hush, not sudden, but inevitable. The resilient grass turned brittle and brown along the low hills, and the once vibrant aspens along the creek dulled their brilliant gold. On the Circle C, the days began with the rhythmic sound of wood being chopped for the fire and ended with the comforting clatter of work boots drying near the welcoming warmth of the hearth. Della had quietly begun keeping the ranch's ledgers, a task she approached with diligence and a surprising aptitude. She was more adept with numbers than Cade had initially anticipated, and he had told her so once, simply and honestly, without teasing or playful banter. She had nodded in quiet acknowledgement and continued to carefully run her finger down the long column of trade tallies, marking the discrepancies where the figures did not align. It gave her something steady and grounding to do in the long evenings, a predictable rhythm that did not depend on the fickleness of her breath or the uncertain strength of her hands. One unseasonably warm afternoon, Cade returned from town with a freshly wrapped oilcloth bundle tucked securely under his arm and a furrow etched between his brows that had not been there when he had departed. She met him halfway to the barn, wiping her flour-dusted palms on her worn apron. "Is something wrong, Cade?" "Not exactly wrong," he said, shifting the bundle slightly. "The sheriff told me that a man has been asking around about 2 children, said they matched the descriptions of Rosie and Reuben. Their mother abandoned them, Della." He glanced towards the small house, his expression grave. "That doesn't prevent someone from making a claim, even after all this time." She folded her arms across her chest, her protective instincts flaring. "They are safe here with us, Cade. That is all that matters. There might be official papers involved, legal documents. I will ride into Helena if I need to find out if this man has any legitimate legal right to them." She nodded slowly, but did not speak. He handed her the oilcloth bundle. "I stopped at the trading post near Cold Rock on the way back. A woman there makes these by hand." Inside the bundle was a magnificent cloak, crafted from deep green wool and lined with soft flannel. The stitching was incredibly tight and even, the hem perfectly finished. She ran her thumb along the smooth edge, then looked up at Cade, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did not have to do this for me, Cade." "I know that I didn't, Della." He rubbed the back of his neck, his gaze intense. "But the wind is coming in stronger now and you need to be warm." She wore the beautiful cloak the next morning when she accompanied him to walk the long fence line. The wind cut sharply off the distant ridges, but the cloak offered her welcome protection from the biting cold. As they passed the lower pasture, she noticed that the old gate was dragging unevenly where it met the weathered post. "That will need fixing before the first snow falls," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "I will bring the necessary tools tomorrow. I could use some help," he added, glancing sideways at her with a hint of a smile. "You offering, Della?" She gave him a look that needed no further explanation. That night, Rosie quietly crawled up beside her while she diligently read through the ranch's increasingly complex supply records. Her hair was slightly tangled from sleep, and her blue eyes were still soft with the lingering traces of pleasant dreams. "Do we get to stay here forever, Della?" she asked, her voice a sleepy whisper. Della closed the heavy ledger, her heart swelling with affection. "If that is what you want, Rosie, then yes, we stay here forever." Rosie nodded solemnly, her small face radiating contentment. "I do want that very much, Della." 2 days later, the man showed up unannounced. He arrived riding a scrawny mule, lean and caked in mud with a narrow face and shifty eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze. He brazenly claimed to be a blood relative of the 2 children, producing a crumpled piece of faded paper with a name scrawled upon it. barely legible and completely lacking any official seal. Cade stood protectively between him and the front porch of the house. "You will need to do much better than that, mister." The man's thin lips tightened into a sneer. "I have legal claims back in Dakota territory. Folks there will vouch for me." "We are not in Dakota now, are we?" Della stepped purposefully out onto the porch, with Rosie clinging tightly to her skirt. "Where were you when those children needed water and shelter and food?" He finally looked directly at her, his eyes cold and calculating. "Their mother owed me a debt. They are mine by right." "Not by any right that matters to us." The man's hand twitched nervously towards his belt, but Cade remained motionless, his expression unwavering. "You ride out of here now and you never come back," he said, his voice dangerously low, "or you will not be riding out at all." The man spat derisively near the porch railing. "You have not seen the last of me." "Perhaps not, but this will be the last that those children ever see of you." He turned and spurred his mule into motion, leaving without a backward glance. Cade rode into town to speak with the sheriff the very next morning, carrying the carefully copied ledger entry Della had made and the signed statement from the compassionate woman at the trading post who had witnessed the children being abandoned. When he returned late that afternoon, he brought reassuring news. The man had several outstanding warrants trailing him south, and no court in the territory would ever grant him custody of the children. That evening, Della stood quietly at the weathered fence, her hands wrapped securely within the warm folds of her protective cloak. The full moon rose slowly and cleanly over the darkening grasslands, and the air held that thin, biting sharpness that always heralded the arrival of snow. Cade leaned beside her, his presence a solid comfort. "You are not afraid of much, are you, Della?" "I am terrified of losing them, of losing this." His hand brushed gently against hers. "You will not, Della. I promise you will not." She did not pull her hand away, but instead allowed his warmth to envelop her. "I have lived a life where nothing ever stayed for long, not homes, not health, not even a sense of peace. You have all three of those now, Cade." She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "That is what frightens me the most, the possibility of losing it all." He did not answer her immediately, but seemed to consider her words carefully. Then he said, "You are not walking through any of this alone, Della. Not ever again. I will always be here for you." She looked up at him, and the wind gently lifted strands of her hair. "And if I get worse, Cade, then I stay? That is the whole of it, isn't it, Della?" She searched his face, noting the deep lines that crinkled near his eyes when he spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "I believe you, Cade." He reached into the inner pocket of his worn coat and pulled out a small, square box crafted from polished walnut, its corners softened by years of handling. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a ring, simple in its design, a band of smooth gold set with a single luminous piece of deep blue turquoise. "My mother gave this to my father when they were married," he said quietly. She had saved for 2 long years to buy it and said she wanted something with the color of the land held within it. Della gently touched the smooth, cool stone. "Turquoise is beautiful, but it fades with time." "Maybe it does, but it holds strong, Della, and it endures." She carefully closed the box and held it tightly to her chest. "Yes, it does." He let out a long breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "We will take it slow, Della, at whatever pace you need. But I want this. I want you now." Cade stepped forward, and she leaned willingly into his embrace, not out of weakness or desperation, but out of strength and a conscious choice. The wind moved gently past them, quieter now, its mournful howl softening to a whisper. The sky above the distant mountains deepened to a soft ash blue, and the first hesitant stars flickered tentatively into place. By the middle of November, a deep hush had settled over the vast and unforgiving land. Snow had not yet fallen, but the ground had hardened noticeably beneath their boots, and the sky wore a perpetual dullness that seemed to slow time itself, making each passing hour feel heavier and more significant. The prairie had become eerily quiet, as though every living creature had drawn inward, instinctively waiting for the inevitable arrival of winter. Inside the small house, Della stood at the kitchen table with her sleeves carefully pinned back, skillfully shaping rounds of dough into delicate biscuits, while Rosie and Reuben sat quietly on the floor, patiently arranging dried corn husks into neat piles for kindling. The fire snapped merrily behind them, casting a warm, steady glow throughout the small room. Each day had taken on its own comforting rhythm, and she no longer had to consciously pause to catch her breath between the simplest of tasks. This was not something she spoke of aloud. It had simply become another quiet, undeniable fact in the slowly emerging shape of her days. Cade stepped in through the back door, his broad shoulders dusted with snow from the cold wind, his cheeks flushed ruddy from his long ride. He shut the door with a deliberate care, as if he did not want to startle the fragile warmth that had settled within. "You are back early," Della said, brushing flour from her fingers. "I brought someone with me," he said, his voice calm. A man stepped in behind him, older, his face etched with the indelible marks of time and hardship, walking with a sturdy cane carved from knotted pine wood. His coat was carefully patched at the elbows, and his eyes, pale but keenly sharp, found Della's quickly. "This is Josiah Keene," Cade said. "He taught me everything that I know about horses. He has been living out near Dead Man's Gulch for years, but the roof on his place finally gave way during the last storm." Josiah nodded once, his manner reserved. "I did not mean to trouble anyone." "You are not troubling anyone," Della said, offering him a sincere smile. "We have plenty of room." He looked at her more closely, his gaze piercing. "Then you must be the woman that Cade used to talk about in his letters. Said you would come through with quiet eyes and something in your voice that made a man forget the worst of his days." Cade shifted uncomfortably behind him. "I never said it exactly like that, Josiah." Della smiled faintly. "I believe that I understand the meaning perfectly well." They gave Josiah the small cot near the comforting warmth of the stove, and that night he regaled them with captivating stories of treacherous mule trains through Wyoming territory and a particularly harsh winter where he had somehow survived on nothing more than pine bark and boiled roots. Rosie curled up on a worn rug near his feet, listening to his every word with rapt attention, never blinking. Later, when the lamp had burned lower, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls, and the exhausted children were safely tucked into their beds, Della found Cade outside in the cold darkness, carefully oiling the creaking hinges of the barn door. She stepped up beside him, pulling her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "He is a kind man, Cade." "He is a lone man, Della." "Not anymore." Cade tested the swing of the door, then wiped his hands on a greasy rag. He seemed more lost than most. Della had buried a wife in Colorado and 2 sons from fever. She looked towards the distant hills, her heart aching with compassion. "He carries it quietly, Cade, just like you do." They stood silently for a long while, their breath rising in white plumes against the dark sky. Then, she said, "I have been thinking a lot about the land just east of the creek, Cade." He turned to face her, his gaze questioning. "What about it?" "There is space enough there to build a small schoolhouse. The children in town either have to ride 2 hours each way or not attend school at all." He watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "You would want to teach there, Della?" "I want to give them something steady and lasting, something that they can always count on. I can give them knowledge, Cade." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. "We could clear the ground this spring, then." Her eyes lifted to his, and she felt a surge of warmth spread through her. "We, Cade? You do not think that I am going to let you build this alone, do you?" "No," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I certainly do not." The next day, Josiah rose early and began patiently carving a small whistle for Reuben from a piece of supple willow branch. Cade collected rough-hewn timber from the old line shack, and Della began carefully copying the alphabet onto scraps of old cloth so that Rosie could begin to learn her letters. That evening, as they sat around the table bathed in the soft light of the flickering lamp, Josiah tapped his cane once against the floor, his gaze knowing. "Are you two planning something more formal here soon?" Della looked down at her hands and then lifted her gaze to meet Cade's. "Yes, Josiah, we are." Cade reached across the table and took her hand in his grip strong and reassuring. "We will be married in the spring, after the thaw comes and the world turns green again." Josiah's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly, forming what might have been a smile. "Good, you two. Life is short, but it is long enough to do right by someone if you choose to. Later that night, as Della carefully folded blankets near the warmth of the crackling hearth, Cade gently touched her elbow. "Are you sure that you want all of this, Della?" he asked, his voice soft. She did not answer him immediately, but instead looked slowly around the familiar room. The soft hum of the simmering kettle, the low rustle of the wind whispering through the shutters, the steady, peaceful breath of the sleeping children behind the thin wall. Then, she turned to meet his gaze. "I want everything with you, Cade," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "Even the hard parts." He nodded in understanding. "Then we will have it all, Della. I promise you that we will." And for the first time in her life, she truly believed in the future. Not as something distant and uncertain, but as something solid and real that she could hold safely in both of her hands. The first snow fell silently in the night, soft as a gentle breath. By morning, the vast prairie had vanished beneath a pristine coat of white, so delicate that it clung to fence rails and window panes like intricately spun lace. Della stood at the open front door, her shawl pulled tightly around her, watching Rosie and Reuben press their eager tracks into the untouched snow that covered the yard. Their bright laughter rose into the still air, sharp and clear as the sunlight glittering off the frozen landscape. Cade stepped up behind her, carrying a small crate filled with warm boots and thick mittens. "They will wear themselves out long before noon, and then they will sleep better for it tonight." He set the box down on the porch with a soft thud. "Josiah says that the mare is bagging up already, could be foaling before the year's end. She is early, but must have taken to the ranch sooner than we figured." Della did not answer him immediately. Her eyes were fixed on Reuben, who had dropped to his knees in the snow and begun painstakingly shaping a crooked mound of snow, his small hands red with cold but determined. "You are quiet this morning, Della," Cade said softly. She turned to face him, her eyes clear and resolute. "I sent for the legal paperwork, Cade." He blinked, surprised. "For the school? For the children's guardianship? The sheriff is helping with the signatures. He knows a judge in Helena who will quickly stamp it and make it official." Cade's mouth drew into a tight line. "Are you sure that you want to carry that burden, Della?" "I already am, Cade." He held her unwavering gaze for a long moment and then nodded slowly in understanding. "Then I will sign with you, Della. We will carry that burden together." She looked down at her hands, her expression pensive. "I did not ask you to do that, Cade. You do not have to." The matter settled quietly between them like a finished chore, needing no further words. That afternoon, Josiah stayed with the eager children while Della and Cade rode slowly into town. The trail was well packed from wagon wheels, but slick in places, and Cade kept one hand near her reins, steadying her mount. She did not speak much during the ride, but with each passing mile she felt her shoulders loosen, her heart lighten. At the sheriff's office, the long-awaited papers were neatly laid out, waiting. She carefully signed her name without the slightest hesitation, the pen steady and sure in her grip. Cade added his signature beside hers, his script rough and utilitarian, but undeniably resolute. As they stepped back out into the biting chill, he wordlessly offered her the reins of her horse with a quick glance. "Do you want to lead the way now, Della?" She took them without hesitation. "Yes, Cade, I think that I do." It snowed again heavily 2 days later, and the mare foaled just before dawn. Cade found her pacing nervously in the straw-filled stall, the spindly-legged foal already on its feet, trembling but upright. He gently rubbed the mare's neck and whispered something low and soothing, then stepped quietly back to allow her to nuzzle the little one. By midday, Reuben had eagerly named the new foal Clover, and Rosie had excitedly declared that she would personally teach it to carry baskets. Josiah shook his head and muttered something about foolish and impractical ideas, but went ahead and carved a tiny leather halter from scrap leather anyway. Winter deepened its icy grip on the land. The small house filled with new, comforting habits, boots thawing near the warm stove, gloves lined up neatly on hooks. The fragrant scent of cedar and sage hung near the lintel to ease Della's fragile lungs. She lost weight, but not strength. She moved through her days with quiet purpose, not rushed haste, and her cough came less frequently now, only during the coldest hours of the night. One evening, as the fierce wind howled relentlessly along the eaves of the house, she carefully set a worn book down in front of Rosie and pointed to a line near the bottom of the page. When the girl slowly sounded out the letters, she hesitated, then triumphantly spoke the word aloud. Home. Della's throat tightened with emotion. She reached out and touched Rosie's small wrist just once, then folded the book shut. Cade appeared in the doorway, his shoulders dusted with fresh snow. "The fence held through the windstorm," he said, "but the back gate is down. I will fix it before the thaw comes." "You do not have to do everything alone, Cade," Della said softly. "I am not alone, Della." That night they sat quietly by the crackling fire, Rosie asleep under a patchwork quilt and Reuben with his small face tucked trustingly against Josiah's side. Cade leaned close enough that Della could feel the comforting heat of his body through her thin dress. "I have been thinking about the land west of the barn," he said, his voice low. "There is a bend in the creek there with good shade and flat ground for a new house, one with more room and a porch that faces the sunrise." She rested her head gently against his strong shoulder. "That sounds like the sort of thing that folks build when they plan on staying for a long, long time, Cade." "I do plan on staying, Della." In the spring, they were married beneath the sheltering branches of a towering cottonwood tree beside the gently flowing creek. There was no formal preacher, just simple vows spoken from the heart with the sheriff as their witness, and Josiah to offer a heartfelt toast of blackberry cordial. Rosie wore a delicate crown of fragrant wild plum blossoms, and Reuben lost a boot in the muddy creek but did not even seem to notice. Della wore a simple gown stitched from muslin that she had been carefully saving since her days back in Missouri, and Cade gave her a ring that he had lovingly smoothed from silver and set with a slender sliver of polished onyx. They moved into the new house before the first frost of the following year. Cade built a sturdy bench near the large eastern window where Della loved to sit with her treasured books. The schoolhouse rose slowly but surely on the edge of their property, hewn from rough pine and sweat, and by autumn the children of Willow Creek were walking or riding across the open fields each morning, carrying their slates and lunches of carefully packed bread. Rosie happily helped to teach the littler ones their letters, and Reuben learned the intricate art of mending harnesses from Josiah, who chose to remain with them, his sturdy cane now worn almost smooth from years of constant use. Della's breath remained remarkably steady through 3 long, harsh winters. The pure air in Willow Creek clearly agreed with her, and she had slowly learned how to pace her days, when to rest and when to push herself gently. She continued to teach and continued to love and continued to truly live. One warm spring evening, long after the schoolhouse had emptied for the day and the surrounding fields had turned a vibrant green once more, she stood on the porch of their home, her fingers intertwined with Cade's, watching the children playfully chase each other through a vibrant patch of wild mustard flowers. "Did you ever think, Cade," she said quietly, "that this would be yours, that this could ever be ours?" "No, Della," he said, turning to look at her, "but it is far better than anything I ever..." And so, in the heart of Montana territory, Della and Cade built not just a life, but a legacy of love, resilience, and the simple, profound joy of choosing to fight for what truly matters. Their story reminds us that even when life deals us unexpected hands, even when the path ahead seems uncertain, the strength of human connection and the unwavering power of hope can bloom in the most barren landscapes. It's a testament to the fact that home isn't just a place, but a feeling, a promise, a haven built with intention and nurtured with love. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Della and Cade's journey. Did this story resonate with you? What part touched you the most? Please, leave a comment below. I'm really interested in reading your interpretations and insights. And if you enjoyed this tale and would like to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. That way, you won't miss out on our next adventure. Thanks for watching.